20 years ago, the seed of an idea was planted in Tasmania. From that small start, big things grew. This week, Bush Heritage Australia celebrated 2 decades of working with ordinary Australians to protect some of the country's finest natural assets. The private conservation group has gained support from some unexpected quarters along the way. A study commissioned by Bush Heritage found the effort so far has provided protection for around 5,500 native fauna and plant species. At least 80 of those are under threat. Cathy McLeish went along to see the organisation's most recent effort to save a small Australian from the brink.
The landscape in Queensland's Central West can be as strikingly beautiful as it is harsh and unforgiving. There's a convergence here of Mitchell grass plains, desert uplands, savanna country, spinifex and salt pans. And in its midst, a little oasis called Edgbaston. This one-time cattle and sheep station is now part of Bush Heritage Australia's growing portfolio of protected properties. And like any oasis, it's water that sustains life here, and the Great Artesian Basin is a generous host.
It's probably the most remarkable spring complex in Australia. The water's coming out at so many different places here, so, we've counted over 100 springs on the place, and they range from that big to, you've seen them as big as a swimming pool, so.
Adam Carezzi is the current custodian. He well appreciates the responsibility Bush Heritage has taken on here. So far, scientists have identified more than 24 species that exist here and nowhere else in the world.
There's at least 4 species of plants that don't live anywhere else. There's up to 14 species of snails, which is pretty remarkable. And then there's the sort of flagship species, I suppose, which is the red-finned blue-eye, which is a small species, grows to about 3 centimetres long.
The tiny red-finned blue-eye is a remnant of a time when this area was covered by a vast inland sea. It was discovered in this spring a decade ago, and while scientists are learning about its past, they're worried about its future.
And then as the place dried out, presumably a population of this ancestral species ended up somewhere like this, and then they've evolved into what they are today over a long, long time.
That long evolutionary process explains why the springs at Edgbaston yield such unique forms of life.
It's a natural lab to study evolution, given that there's all these species that have evolved here independently from anywhere else, and that they've also diversified, within groups. So the fact that you've got multiple species of snails here in itself is fascinating, because, why would snails need to diversify? There must be reasons, and that's what drives evolution. So, we could... this place will be... this place has got the potential to tell us so much.
Bush Heritage Australia is a non-government, not-for-profit conservation organisation that's largely funded by public donations. Its vision is to protect 1% of Australia by 2025. And like Edgbaston, the properties are selected on the basis of their environmental value and the amount of biodiversity each one of them protects. All up, Bush Heritage now protects almost 1 million hectares of land, plants and animals across 33 reserves it owns and manages across Australia. And it started in Tasmania. It was less than 10 years after conservationist Bob Brown led the campaign to stop the Franklin River Dam, and he wanted to protect 2 blocks of old-growth forest from wood chippers. So he bought the blocks at auction.
Problem was I didn't have the money. I just got $40,000 from an American foundation, and I put that in as a deposit. We had to raise the $200,000 extra, and decided to take the hat around, and that's how Bush Heritage began.
The organisation was born at his property, Ora Ora, in Tasmania, which he's since donated to Bush Heritage.
People just took to it. They liked it. Its time had come in Australia where people who had a bit of spare money could put something a way for the saving of the natural environment so that their children and posterity could enjoy it too.
The way Bush Heritage sees it, there's been a significant shift in attitude toward the environment over the last 20 years. And they say Australians are putting their money where their mouth is.
We have tremendous philanthropy in Australia, from individuals giving a few dollars a week as they do to Bush Heritage, through to larger gifts and bequests of land and bequests of other property. So philanthropy has grown, and it's been encouraged to grow by philanthropists, by the government and by the work of organisations like Bush Heritage.
The organisation has even found an unlikely ally in its quest.
And I guess there would have been people who took the view that this is good cattle country going to waste. But I think as time has gone on, people have accepted them as good neighbours and contributors in the local community.
In a unique alliance, Bush Heritage is working alongside one of Australia's biggest beef producers, the North Australian Pastoral Company, or NAPCO, to protect almost 2 million hectares in the Lake Eyre Basin.
It's a good relationship. They're great neighbours of ours. I think they've learned a bit from us in terms of how to deal with neighbours, in terms of fire management, fencing programs, that sort of stuff. But equally, we've learnt a fair bit from them, and part of the agreement we have is that they provide some advice to us in terms of managing our ecological assets and our environmental assets.
The conservation agreement on NAPCO's cattle property, Glen Ormiston, created the largest voluntary nature refuge agreement in the country. Back at Edgbaston, they're fixated with numbers too. Science and strategies aimed at saving the critically endangered redfin blueye. When Bush Heritage acquired this property 3 years ago, there were just 4 populations.
4 populations of a species is not very many when they're in tiny little springs like this. If they keep diminishing, eventually you're going to be down to, say, 1 population or something like that, and then that's just one step away from extinction.
Their biggest threat is a small American fish introduced in the 1920s to eat mosquito larvae. The gambusia had very little impact on mozzies, but turned life in the springs upside down.
Okay, so this is the problem. Everything with a black belly is a female, and so the bigger that black spot and the fatter looking they are means the closer they are to basically giving birth to another generation of gambusia.
So in terms of invasive species, how do you classify these?
These are the top order. They don't get any better than this. They're probably the world's #1 invasive species. Once we get this invasive species gambusia in a spring, it's curtains for the blueye.
The other approach being tried here is to re-establish populations of the little native fish into springs which are literally pest-free.
So we moved 20 into this spring and 20 into 2 other springs. And these guys are going particularly well, so it's one little victory.
This is the first time the rare fish has been filmed, giving the scientist an opportunity for close examination.
So this little population, cross your fingers, we had a good look at them yesterday, and it looks like some of the females might be, nice and round in the belly. So maybe in a couple of months' time we'll have, a couple of hundred redfin blueye in here, which would be sensational. This is not the first species to be critically endangered. Hopefully it won't be the next one to be extinct either.
Kathy McLeish reporting there.